The air was thick with silence as I stared at the space where his things used to be, where he used to be. It had been a few weeks since Ethan and I had ended our relationship, but the memories still lingered, hanging in the air like a heavy fog that I couldn't shake. It felt like everything I had built with him, all the plans, the dreams, the future, had evaporated, leaving behind nothing but the echoes of what was. It wasn't supposed to end like this. We had been inseparable, or at least that's what I thought. There were signs, of course, things I had ignored, small cracks that became chasms when the truth finally hit me. But at the time, I couldn't see it. Now, in the aftermath, it felt as though I'd been blindsided. I'd given everything to that relationship, every ounce of my energy and love. But somehow, it wasn't enough for Ethan. The relationship had become one-sided, with me always giving, always sacrificing, and him, well, he'd been pulling away long before I noticed. Then came the fateful day, the day I confronted him about the distance that had grown between us. He'd looked at me, his eyes vacant, and said the words that I would never forget. "I don't love you anymore." It felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. My chest tightened, and for a moment I could hardly breathe. He didn't even seem sorry. He didn't fight for us. He didn't even try to explain. After that, everything changed. I walked away, and it felt like I was leaving a part of myself behind. The weeks following were a blur of crying and questioning, wondering what I had done wrong. I found myself lost in a sea of doubts. Maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe I had failed. But the worst part? Ethan's indifference. He wasn't just leaving me, he was leaving without looking back. The worst thing about it wasn't the end itself. It was how easily he seemed to let me go. I could have stayed in that place, drowning in my own self-pity, but I didn't. The night I walked away from him, I made a vow to myself, to prove to Ethan, to myself, that I could rise above this. I was better than the way he had treated me. I wasn't going to let this breakup define me. I spent the next few days focusing on what I loved, on what made me feel alive. My training for the upcoming championship became my anchor. There was something about the rhythm of the sport, the discipline, the sweat. It gave me clarity. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. The loneliness was still there, but I refused to let it consume me. As I tied my shoes and stepped onto the track, I made a decision. I was going to focus on the championship, on me. It was no longer about Ethan. It was about my future. It was about winning, not for him, but for myself. But what I didn't expect was how quickly everything would change when someone new came into my life. The days after my breakup felt like a strange blur. I had put on a brave face for the world, but inside, I was still processing everything: the hurt, the betrayal, and the overwhelming loneliness. But it wasn't until I stepped onto the track again that I started to feel like myself again. Every step, every breath became a small victory. The pounding rhythm of my feet on the ground was grounding, a reminder that I could still move forward. The championship was only a few months away, and I was determined to push myself harder than ever before. I had always been passionate about running, but this time it was different. There was a fire in me now, something fierce that wasn't there before. With every stride, I imagined Ethan watching from the sidelines, wondering if he had made the biggest mistake of his life. I'd show him. I'd show everyone. But just as I was getting into the rhythm of training again, something unexpected happened. Luke. He wasn't new to me, but somehow he was. Luke had always been a friend of mine. We'd grown up in the same neighborhood, gone to school together, and even shared a few classes. We had mutual friends, but we'd never really connected before. We had crossed paths, exchanged pleasantries, but that was it, until now. One evening after my training session, I was stretching by the track when I heard a voice behind me. "You're running hard these days. Training for something special?" I turned to see Luke, leaning against the fence with a half smile, his brown eyes sparkling with mischief. I wasn't sure why, but I felt an odd sense of comfort when I saw him. There was something calming about his presence, something that made me feel like everything would be okay. Just the championship, I replied, smiling weakly. I thought so. You've always been serious about it. I laughed. Well, yeah, it's all I've got right now. There was a moment of silence before Luke spoke again, his tone lighter now. You've got more than that. I looked up at him, confused. He took a few steps forward, eyes softening with understanding. You've got your passion, your strength. You're not just doing this for a medal, are you? You're doing it for yourself. His words struck me in a way I wasn't prepared for. No one had said it so clearly before. For so long, I had been running to prove something to someone else, to prove that I could win, even without Ethan. But Luke was right. I wasn't just running to prove my worth anymore. I was running for me. I was finding myself in the process. The days that followed were a whirlwind of intense training and new connections. Luke and I started spending more time together. He would join me for light runs or help me stretch after a grueling workout. It wasn't anything romantic, at least not yet, but there was an undeniable connection between us. It felt easy, like I had known him for much longer than I actually had. As the championship drew nearer, I began to feel stronger, both physically and emotionally. Luke's encouragement, his quiet presence, made me realize how much I had been missing. He wasn't like Ethan. He didn't just take, he gave. He made me laugh when I needed it most and pushed me to be better, not for anyone else, but for me. One evening, as we were walking home from a late training session, Luke spoke again, breaking the comfortable silence between us. You know, I've always admired your determination, your name, he said, a playful glint in his eyes. But I have to admit, I think you're going to blow everyone away at this championship. I glanced at him, my heart fluttering for reasons I hadn't fully acknowledged. Thanks, Luke. But it's not just about winning anymore. It's about showing myself I can do it. He nodded, but then there was a pause, a weight in the air that wasn't there before. I just hope, after all of this, you don't forget to take a moment for yourself, he said, his voice quieter now, more sincere. It was simple. It was just a small statement, but it meant everything to me. Luke wasn't just someone I was training with. He was becoming someone I cared about, someone who made me feel like I wasn't alone in this. That night, I lay in bed thinking about everything that had changed in such a short amount of time. Ethan's absence still hurt, but the pain was no longer consuming me. I had Luke, who had quietly become a source of strength, and I had my goal, the championship. I wasn't just competing for a win anymore. I was competing for my future, for my peace of mind. For the first time since the breakup, I wasn't just running from something. I was running toward something, and it felt incredibly freeing. The next few weeks passed in a blur of training and small moments of calm that I hadn't expected. Luke had become more than just someone I worked out with. He had become someone I trusted. His words, his quiet presence, and his genuine support had given me a sense of peace I hadn't known I needed. With every conversation, I found myself feeling more alive, more hopeful. But there was still that nagging part of me, the part that questioned whether I was doing all of this for the right reasons. Ethan's face would occasionally flash in my mind, usually when I was pushing myself too hard. The memories of him, of the way we used to be, lingered like a shadow, but with every passing day, the weight of his absence seemed to fade, replaced by a new sense of purpose. And that new purpose had a name, Luke. One evening, after another intense training session, Luke and I were walking toward the small cafe near the track, our usual post-workout routine. The air was cool, and the sky above was streaked with pinks and purples from the setting sun. I hadn't realized how much I'd started looking forward to these quiet moments together, just the two of us. We reached the cafe and took our usual corner table. Luke always ordered the same thing, an iced coffee, no sugar. I smiled as he placed his order, knowing exactly what he liked. He sat down across from me, leaning back in his chair with a relaxed smile. You've been running harder lately. How are you feeling? I shrugged, trying to act casual, but the truth was, I felt stronger than I ever had. Good, I said, sipping my water. Better than I've felt in a long time, actually. Luke raised an eyebrow. That's great. I can tell you're on fire out there. I chuckled, but a part of me felt a little self-conscious. Yeah, I think I'm starting to believe I can win this thing. The championship was just around the corner, and I was finally starting to feel confident. The doubts that had plagued me for so long were slowly being replaced by belief. I wasn't just running for validation anymore. I was running because I wanted to prove to myself that I could. Luke's expression softened. You're going to do great. But remember, you don't have to do it alone. His words felt like a warm embrace, like he understood me in ways I hadn't even realized. It wasn't just about winning for him. It was about supporting me, about being there when it got tough. Thanks, Luke, I said quietly, meeting his gaze. That means a lot. There was a pause, a shift in the air between us. I could feel the unspoken tension, the undeniable pull that had been growing between us. He leaned forward, his voice lower now. I want you to know something, Sandra. I felt my heart skip a beat. Was he about to say what I thought he was? What's that? He hesitated for a moment, his eyes searching mine. I've always believed in you. More than you know. I couldn't help the smile that tugged at my lips. The way he said it, the sincerity in his eyes, made me feel like I mattered, like I wasn't just another person in his life, but someone who had earned his respect, his care. Before I could respond, our drinks arrived, and we both broke the tension with a casual laugh. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. There was no denying the growing connection between us. I wasn't sure where it would lead, but I could no longer ignore the way I felt when I was around him. As we sat there, sipping our drinks and chatting about everything and nothing, I realized that for the first time since the breakup, I was beginning to feel like I could have everything, my dreams, my goals, and maybe even Luke. As the days slipped into weeks, the countdown to the championship became more real, more pressing. Every morning I woke up to the sound of my alarm buzzing, pulling me out of a dream where Ethan was still part of my life. But those dreams were fading with each passing day. I had a new focus, a new energy, and it wasn't about him anymore. It was about me and about Luke. With every training session, my body pushed through fatigue and my mind began to sharpen. I could feel my muscles becoming stronger, the rhythm of my runs more fluid. But just as I began to believe that I could truly win this thing, self-doubt crept in like an unwelcome shadow. I had faced so many challenges before. The emotional toll of the breakup, the loneliness, the pressure to prove myself. But now the fear of failure felt different. It wasn't just about Ethan or proving him wrong. It was about the weight of expectations, my own included. You're running like you've never run before, Luke said one afternoon as I stopped to catch my breath after a particularly tough lap. What's going on, Sandra? You're pushing yourself hard. I wiped the sweat from my brow and glanced up at him. He was always so observant, so attuned to everything around him, especially me. I smiled weakly, but the truth was, I was feeling the pressure. I don't want to let myself down, but every time I think I'm close, I feel like I'm not enough. Luke stepped closer, concern written all over his face. He placed a hand gently on my shoulder, the contact soothing yet intense. Sandra, listen to me. You've already shown so much strength. The only person you need to prove anything to is yourself. Don't let doubt ruin this for you. You've come so far. His words were like a balm to my wounds, a gentle reminder of why I was doing this, not for anyone else, but for me. Slowly, I nodded, letting his encouragement sink in. I know, I said, taking a deep breath. It's just hard sometimes, you know? After everything that happened, it feels like the stakes are higher than ever. Luke smiled, his eyes softening. The stakes are high, sure, but that's what makes it worth it. You're stronger than you think. I stood a little straighter, my resolve solidifying. I had come too far to let self-doubt control me. Luke was right. This wasn't about anyone else. It was about reclaiming my own strength, my own future. The following weeks were filled with intense training. I began to push myself harder, fueled by the support of Luke and my newfound belief in my own abilities. There were still moments of uncertainty, Days when the exhaustion felt too much to handle, but I pressed on. Every run was a step closer to my goal. But not everything was smooth sailing. A few days before the championship, I received a text that I never expected. Ethan. It read, "I heard you're in the championship. I just wanted to say, I hope you do well." I stared at the message, my heart hammering in my chest. The old feelings resurfaced, the wounds I thought had healed. Part of me wanted to respond, to confront him, to remind him of everything he had lost. But another part of me, the part that had grown stronger with Luke's support, knew better. I deleted the message before I could say anything. I didn't need to hear from Ethan anymore. I had someone who truly supported me, someone who believed in me without any strings attached. I had Luke, and that was enough. On the morning of the championship, the nerves set in. My hands shook as I laced up my shoes, the weight of the event settling on my shoulders. This was it, the culmination of months of training, of pushing myself to the limit. Luke found me before I could even step out the door. His eyes were filled with pride, and a small smile tugged at his lips. "You've got this, Sandra," he said, his voice steady and confident. "I believe in you." I couldn't help but smile back. "Thanks, Luke, really." He placed his hands on my shoulders, his gaze intense. "Just remember, no matter what happens, you're already a winner in my eyes." His words felt like a shield, wrapping me in warmth and calm. For the first time in weeks, I felt ready. I wasn't doing this for anyone else. I wasn't trying to prove anything to my past. I was running for myself, for my future. The morning of the championship dawned clear and bright, but my stomach was anything but calm. As I stood at the starting line, surrounded by athletes from all over, the weight of the moment settled into my chest. The crowd's murmurs, the soft rustle of nervous energy in the air, it was all overwhelming. Yet, amid the chaos, there was a strange sense of clarity. This wasn't just about winning anymore. It wasn't about Ethan or proving anything to anyone. It was about embracing who I had become, a stronger, more confident version of myself. It was about celebrating the journey, the hard work, the pain, the transformation. Luke stood nearby, his presence like a steadying force. He was watching from the sidelines, as he always did, but this time his eyes locked with mine and held. His smile was gentle, reassuring. "You've got this, Sandra." His voice reached me, even across the distance. I nodded, taking a deep breath. The butterflies in my stomach didn't vanish, but with Luke's support, they felt more like fuel than fear. The crowd began to cheer as the race was about to begin, and the tension in the air seemed to crackle with anticipation. The starting gun fired. I took off, my legs moving in rhythm with the pounding beat of my heart. The first few minutes felt like a blur, my body running on instinct, the familiar feeling of pushing past my limits creeping into my muscles. I didn't pay attention to the other runners around me, only focusing on the sound of my feet hitting the track and the steady pulse of my breath. The wind was sharp against my face, the sun warming my skin, but it was the determination in my heart that kept me going. This was it. This was my moment to shine. Halfway through the race, I felt the pressure mount. The other runners had begun to catch up, closing the gap. I could hear their footsteps, feel their presence behind me, and for a brief second, doubt crept in. What if I couldn't finish? What if they were faster, stronger? But then I remembered Luke's words, "No matter what happens, you're already a winner in my eyes." That was all I needed. I dug deeper, pushing through the pain in my legs, my chest burning with each breath. With every stride, I moved closer to the finish line. The world seemed to narrow to that single point, the finish, the culmination of everything I had worked for. As I neared the final stretch, something inside me clicked. This wasn't about competing against anyone else. It was about completing the journey, about claiming victory over my past, over the doubts that had haunted me for so long. The crowd's cheers grew louder, but I only focused on one thing, crossing that finish line. And then I did. The sound of the final whistle echoed in my ears as I collapsed across the line, my legs weak but my heart full. I had done it. I had won. For a brief moment, everything went quiet as if the world was holding its breath, and then the roar of the crowd came crashing back, filling my ears with the sound of my accomplishment. I had won the championship. I barely had time to catch my breath before I felt someone's arms around me, pulling me into a tight embrace. I looked up, and there he was, Luke. His smile was wide, his eyes sparkling with pride. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with awe. "I knew you could." I smiled through the tears that had started to form. "I couldn't have done it without you, Luke. Your support, it means everything." He laughed softly, shaking his head. "You did all the hard work. I just reminded you that you were capable of more than you knew." As I stood there, in the arms of the person who had supported me through every moment of doubt, I realized something profound. This wasn't just a victory on the track. It was a personal victory, a victory over my fears, my insecurities, and my past. I had found a strength I didn't know I had, and in the process, I had found someone who truly believed in me. Someone who saw me for who I was, not who I had been with Ethan. Later that evening, after the ceremony and the celebrations, I sat in the quiet of my room, replaying the race in my mind. My phone buzzed with a message, and I hesitated before reading it. It was from Ethan. "I heard you won. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, I should have never let you go." For a second, I felt a flicker of old emotions, the pain, the heartbreak. But just as quickly that flicker faded, I had won, and Ethan's words didn't matter anymore. The past was behind me, and the future was mine to shape. Click on the subscription button and stay tuned for the next episode.